I held her face so hard that my fingers sank into her skin. The screams echoed off the walls, but they weren't hers. They were my brother's, begging me to stop. My thumbs found the sockets, and I pressed. I pressed until I felt something give way, until the blood ran hot between my fingers, until she finally stopped breathing those poisonous orders that destroyed my entire life. When I finished, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely recognize them as my own. My brother was huddled in the corner, covered in blood, looking at me like I was a monster. And maybe I am, but let me tell you what she did to us before you judge me. My name is Joseph. I'm 22 years old. I'm telling this story from my apartment, a tiny place I managed to rent after I got out of the detention center 8 months ago. I spent 3 years in there, from when I was 19 until I turned 22, processing what I did and trying to understand how I got to that point. People who know my story see me in two ways. Either I'm a monster who brutally mutilated his own mother, or I'm just another victim of a system that failed me. The truth is, I'm both. What I did was horrible, I know that. I gouged out my mother's eyes with my own hands. She survived, but she's blind forever. She's serving time now for everything she did in a women's prison a few hours from here. Part of me feels guilty about what I did. The other part, the one that carries years of trauma and pain, feels like it was the only way to stop the cycle of horror she created. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm not trying to justify the unjustifiable. I just want you to understand the full context before you decide who I am. Because the story they told in the newspapers, on social media, on the news, that story is incomplete. It's missing years of silent suffering, muffled screams, of a boy who begged for help and was never heard. My older brother Ryan was 21 when it all happened. Today he's 23 and doesn't talk to me anymore. I don't blame him. What we lived through together created a toxic bond that neither of us can fully process. He was my protector for some time, and I was his too. When I got out of the detention center, I thought I could finally breathe, that the nightmare was over. But nightmares don't end when you open your eyes. They keep chewing away at your sanity, corroding your ability to trust anything or anyone. I wake up every night in a cold sweat, with my hands tingling, feeling the weight of that moment in every cell of my body. In the first months after my release, I could barely leave the house. Every look on the street felt like an accusation. Every whisper seemed to be about me. That's the kid who gouged out his mother's eyes. That's the monster. Little by little, I learned to live with the weight of what I did, but also with the weight of what was done to me. Now, if you're really paying attention to my story, if you really want to understand what happened, I need you to do something for me. Like this video now, subscribe to Traumatic Accounts, turn on notifications so you don't miss any testimony, and tell me in the comments where you're watching this from. Seriously, I want to know. It helps me feel like I'm not talking alone into the void, that someone is actually listening. If you made it this far, you've already shown more interest in me than most of the people who should have protected me when I was a child. And what I'm going to tell you now will make you understand why that night happened, why my hands did what they did, why my brother couldn't stop me, why neither of us could escape before it was too late. I was born into a seemingly normal family. My dad was a mechanic. My mother worked at a supermarket as a cashier. Ryan was born 2 years before me, and we were close from a young age. We lived in a simple house in the suburbs. Nothing luxurious, but comfortable enough. I remember birthdays with homemade cake, playing ball with my dad in the backyard, watching cartoons with Ryan on Sunday mornings. My mother, Linda, was always a controlling woman. Even in my earliest memories, she had this need to dominate every aspect of our routine. She chose our clothes until an age when we should have been doing it ourselves, decided who we could play with, what shows to watch, what food to eat. My dad, Robert, was the opposite. Calm, patient, always trying to soften her explosions. When I was 7, my dad died in a car accident, a head-on collision on the highway when he was coming home from work. I remember the wake, holding Ryan's hand while we looked at the coffin. I remember my mother dressed in black with an expression that wasn't exactly sadness. It was almost relief. At the time, I thought I was imagining things. Today, I understand that she was finally free from the only person who moderated her impulses. In the months following my dad's death, my mother changed. Or rather, she revealed who she'd always been underneath the mask she kept on when he was alive. The rules at home multiplied. We had rigid schedules for everything. Waking up, eating, studying, sleeping. Any deviation resulted in punishment. At first, it was simple punishment, going without dinner, losing a toy, but it quickly escalated to something more physical. She started hitting. It wasn't occasional slaps of frustration. They were planned, methodical beatings. She used my dad's belt, that thick leather one he kept in the closet. Sometimes she'd hit us with the wooden rod that was behind the kitchen door. Ryan, being older, tried to protect me. He'd take the blame for things I did, put himself between me and her when he sensed I was going to be the target. When I was 9 and Ryan was 11, our mother started working night shifts. This meant we were left alone at home from 7 at night until 6 in the morning. She'd lock us in from the outside, putting a padlock on the door. "So you don't get into trouble," she'd say. If we got hungry in the middle of the night, that was our problem. If we needed to use the bathroom and there was no toilet paper, our problem. If we were scared of noises from the street, our problem. Ryan took on the caregiver role. He'd make me sandwiches when our mother forgot to leave food, console me when I woke up crying from nightmares, teach me homework. He was my dad, my brother, and my best friend, all at the same time. And I loved him more than anything in the world. But my mother was jealous of that closeness. She saw our bond as a threat to the control she had over us. She started punishing us for being close. If she saw me hugging Ryan when I was scared, she'd separate us and hit us both. If Ryan defended me, she'd hit him even harder. Gradually, she created a dynamic where showing affection for each other resulted in pain. At 10, I tried to tell my teacher at school about the beatings. I showed her the purple marks on my arms, on my back. She seemed concerned, wrote everything down, said she was going to take action. That afternoon, when my mother came to pick me up, the teacher talked to her briefly. I heard fragments of the conversation. My mother explaining that I was a difficult child, that sometimes I needed firm discipline, that she was doing the best she could as a single mother. The teacher seemed to accept the explanation, and that night my mother beat me with an intensity she'd never shown before. She beat me until I couldn't scream anymore, until my body went numb from the pain. "You will never, ever tell anyone anything again," she hissed between blows. "You're mine. You're both mine. And if anyone tries to separate us, I'll kill you first, understand? I'll kill you." I believed her completely, because I saw that night in her eyes something I'd never seen before, the true extent of her madness. She wasn't just angry. She was completely dissociated, lost in a dark place inside her own mind. And I knew, with that instinctive certainty that children have, that she would follow through on the threat. Ryan also noticed the change. After that night, we stopped trying to ask for help. We stopped telling teachers, neighbors, distant relatives who rarely visited us. We became isolated islands in the middle of an ocean of manufactured normalcy. At school, we were the quiet but polite brothers. At home, we were prisoners. The following years blended into a routine of survival. Wake up, go to school, come back, do chores, eat dinner in silence, go to the bedroom, wait. Always waiting to see what mood she'd be in, what reason she'd invent to punish us, how long it would take before we did something that triggered her fury. But the worst was yet to come, because when I was 13, my mother found a new way to control us. A way that would break any remaining sanity we had. A way that would transform my brother from protector into something I couldn't name without feeling nauseous. The change started on a winter night. I was 13, Ryan was 15. My mother called us to the living room after dinner, something she rarely did. Usually she sent us straight to the bedroom, but that night she wanted to talk. "You're growing up," she said, looking at us with that calculating expression I'd learned to fear. "Ryan, you're almost a man now. And Joseph? You're not a child anymore." She paused, her eyes moving between us in a way that made me want to run. "It's time for you to learn about responsibility, about hierarchy, about who's in charge in this house." She then explained her new system. Ryan, as the older one, would have certain responsibilities over me. He'd be in charge of disciplining me when I did something wrong, but not just hitting. Anyone could hit. No, she had something more elaborate in mind, something that would break us in ways that physical violence alone never could. "If Ryan doesn't do what I tell him," she said, her voice calm and cold as ice, "I'll kill you both. I'm not kidding. I'll make it look like an accident, but you'll be dead. And if Joseph tries to resist or tell anyone, I'll kill them both the same way. The only way you'll survive is by obeying completely. That night, she forced Ryan to hit me. Not regular beatings. She described exactly how she wanted it, where to hit, how many times, with what intensity, and forced him to do it while she watched, smoking a cigarette, correcting his technique when she thought it necessary. I saw tears running down my brother's face while he did what she ordered. I saw the self-hatred in every movement. And in the end, she forced him to do disgusting things to me. Things no brother should do to another. Things that disgust me just to remember. How could a mother enjoy seeing that absurdity that one brother did to another brother? I was left with pain in bizarre places. Please, Ryan. No, I begged, but he continued, because we both knew she would follow through on the threat. She was capable. Those empty eyes, that emotionless voice. She would kill us without hesitation if we didn't obey. This became part of our routine. 2-3 times a week, she'd invent some reason why I needed to be disciplined and force Ryan to execute. Sometimes I hadn't even done anything wrong. She just wanted to break us, remind us who had power, and it worked. Gradually, I began to fear my brother as much as I feared her. Ryan tried to resist at first, tried to use less force, tried to make the punishments lighter, but she noticed immediately and increased the demands. Harder, she'd order, or you know what happens. And he obeyed, because we were both trapped in the same snare. Parallel to this, she intensified the psychological abuse. She constantly told us we were useless, that no one would love us, that we should be grateful she hadn't abandoned us when my dad died. You think anyone cares about you? She'd laugh. I'm all you have. Without me, you'd starve on the street. She isolated us completely. We couldn't have friends. We couldn't participate in extracurricular activities. Couldn't leave the house except to go to school. She checked our backpacks daily, looking for anything that indicated we were trying to have a life outside her control. Letters, notes, phone numbers, anything resulted in severe punishment. At 15, I tried to run away. I gathered some money I'd stolen from her purse over months. I planned to leave in the middle of the night, but Ryan stopped me. Not because he didn't want me to go, but because he was afraid of what she'd do to me if she found me, or to him if he stayed behind. She'll kill us, Joseph, he whispered, holding my arm as I tried to open the bedroom window. You don't know her like I do. She'll find us and she'll kill us. And then he told me things he'd never revealed before, that my mother had a gun hidden in her room, that she'd already threatened to use it on him when he was my age and thought about running away, that she'd shown us in countless ways that there was no escape. That night, I cried so much I passed out from exhaustion, and Ryan sat beside me, his own silent tears falling as he stroked my hair, like he used to when we were little. I'm sorry, he whispered repeatedly. I'm sorry for everything. The dynamic between us was completely destroyed. I loved him and hated him simultaneously. I understood rationally that he was as much a victim as I was, but emotionally my body froze every time he approached. Because my wounds, my scars, my pain, they all came from his hands, even if ordered by her. At 16, I started having suicidal thoughts. I fantasized about ways to disappear, to simply cease to exist. It seemed like the only way out, but whenever I got close to actually doing something, I thought about Ryan. What would happen to him if I died? She'd focus all her fury on him, destroy him completely. So I developed a different anger. Not against Ryan. He was as much a victim as I was. But against her. Against that woman who gave birth to us and then decided to torture us like we were her toys. I started fantasizing about fighting back, about making her feel a fraction of the pain she inflicted on us. When I turned 18, I thought I could finally leave legally, but my mother had anticipated this. She'd made me sign documents years before when I was a minor and didn't understand what I was signing, making me financially dependent on her. I had no money, no documents, nothing. I was of legal age only on paper. Ryan was 20 at the time and was in the same situation. She kept us captive through financial control, constant threats, and the deeply rooted fear she'd cultivated in us since childhood. We were adult men, physically capable of fighting back, but psychologically so broken we couldn't even conceive of real resistance. But the anger inside me kept growing, fed by each new incident, each new humiliation, each new night when Ryan was forced to hurt me while tears ran down his face. The anger fermented, darkened, transformed into something dense and poisonous inside my chest. I knew something had to break, that we couldn't continue like this forever, but I didn't imagine what it would be like when the breaking point finally came. I didn't imagine the violence I'd be capable of. I didn't imagine that my own hands would become the tools of my liberation. The catalyst came 3 months before my 19th birthday. Ryan was 21. It had been a particularly brutal week. She punished us almost daily, inventing imaginary infractions, forcing Ryan to execute increasingly degrading punishments. That specific night, I got home a few minutes late from school because the bus broke down. 5 minutes. She was waiting in the living room, the wooden rod already in hand. "Ryan," she called, her voice icy. "Come here." My brother appeared from the kitchen, and I immediately saw he was at his limit. His hands were shaking. His eyes were red. Not from recent tears, but from the accumulated exhaustion of years without sleeping properly, of years carrying guilt and trauma. "Please, Mom," he said, and his voice broke. "Not today." He barely got late. "Please." It was the first time in years that Ryan had directly contested an order from her, and her face contorted into an expression of pure fury. "What?" she hissed, standing up. "You're disobeying me?" "I can't take it anymore," Ryan said, and began to cry openly. "I can't do this anymore. I can't. Please forgive me, Joseph. I can't hurt you anymore. I can't." He turned to me, his face devastated. And in that moment, I saw my brother. Not the instrument of torture she'd forced him to be, but my protector, my friend, my Ryan. "Forgive me," he repeated, falling to his knees. "Forgive me for everything." Our mother was paralyzed for a second, processing the rebellion. Then she went to her room. I heard the drawer opening, and when she came back, she had the gun in her hand. "So this is how it is," she said, pointing the gun at Ryan. "You think you can defy me? Think you can disobey? I warned you what would happen." Everything slowed down. I saw her finger on the trigger. I saw Ryan frozen, looking at the barrel of the gun. I saw years of terror, of pain, of silent suffering converging in that single moment, and something inside me broke. It wasn't a conscious decision, it was pure instinct. I ran and threw myself at her before I could process what I was doing. We hit the floor, the gun escaping from her hand and sliding across the floor. Ryan reacted immediately, grabbing the gun, putting it out of reach. She was screaming, trying to scratch me, bite me, push me, but something had changed. Years of repressed anger exploded all at once. I held her wrists, pinned them against the floor, looked into those eyes that watched me suffer with indifference, that shone with satisfaction when Ryan hurt me under her orders, that never showed a shred of maternal love. "You destroyed us," I said, my voice hoarse. "You took 2 children and destroyed them for pure entertainment, for power, for nothing. Let me go now," she screamed back. "I'm your mother. You owe me respect. You owe me obedience." And that's when the anger transformed into something darker, more visceral. "Respect?" I laughed. But there was no humor, just a bitterness so deep it hurt. "You want respect?" I don't know exactly when I decided. There was no moment of, now I'm going to do this. It was more like an impulse that took over me. An impulse fed by every scar on my body, every nightmare I had, every tear I shed while my own brother hurt me because she ordered it. My hands moved to her face. She realized the intention and started screaming louder, shaking her head, trying to break free. Ryan shouted, "Joseph, no!" But his voice seemed to come from far away, muffled by the ringing in my ear, by the accelerated pulse, by the adrenaline. I held her face firm, my fingers finding the temples. She spat at me, cursed me, promised to kill me as soon as she got free. And maybe it was that promise, the certainty that she would never stop, would never have remorse, would never leave us alone that made me continue. My thumbs found her eye sockets. She realized, and the quality of the scream changed. It went from anger to pure panic. "No, no, please," she begged. And for the first time in years, I heard her plead. I didn't stop. I pressed, felt the initial resistance, the strange texture, the heat. She struggled with superhuman strength, but I was stronger, fed by years of accumulated fury. Ryan was screaming in the background, begging me to stop, but I couldn't or didn't want to. The line between the two had disappeared completely. I pressed deeper. I heard a sound I'll never forget. A wet, horrible sound. Blood ran between my fingers, warm and sticky. Her screams became more shrill, more desperate, and I kept pressing until I felt something give way completely. When I finally stopped and pulled away, my hands were covered in blood. She was on the floor, convulsing, hands over her face, inhuman screams coming from her throat. Blood gushed between her fingers, ran across the floor, stained everything. Ryan was huddled in the corner in shock, looking alternately at me and at her. "What did you do?" he whispered repeatedly. "What did you do, Joseph?" I looked at my hands. Really looked. Saw what they did? And I felt nothing. Not guilt, not horror, not satisfaction, just an immense emptiness where there had been anger before. "I freed us," I answered, my voice strangely calm. "She'll never be able to hurt us again." Ryan picked up the phone with trembling hands and called emergency services. While we waited, I sat there, looking at that woman who gave me life and then tried to systematically destroy it. She was still moaning, still writhing, but the screams had transformed into low crying. The ambulance arrived first, then the police. The paramedics rushed to stabilize her. The police officers handcuffed me, read me my rights. One of them looked at the scene, the blood, the gun left in the corner, Ryan trembling, and asked what had happened. "She tried to kill us," Ryan said, his voice choked. "Our mother, she was going to kill us. Joseph he just reacted." But it wasn't the complete truth. I hadn't just reacted. I had released years of hatred in a brutal and irreversible way. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. In the police car, I looked out the window as we drove away. I saw the neighbors gathered, whispering, pointing. I saw the ambulance lights flashing and felt that my life, as I knew it, was completely over. But for the first time in years, I also felt like I could breathe. I spent the first months in the detention center in complete torpor. I didn't process very well what I'd done or why I did it. I just knew it was over. She couldn't hurt us anymore. That was the only certainty that kept me functioning. Ryan gave complete testimony to the authorities. He told everything. Years of abuse, the death threats, the gun, the punishment system she created. He showed his own scars, the marks that remained from years of being forced to hurt his own brother. Investigators found documentation, neighbors who'd had suspicions but never intervened, teachers who'd received signs but ignored them. My mother, Linda, survived, but was permanently blind. During the trial, she tried to play the victim, claimed we were problematic children, that she was a loving mother doing the best she could, but the amount of evidence against her was overwhelming. She was sentenced to 15 years for prolonged child abuse, false imprisonment, and attempted murder. I was tried at 19. My lawyer claimed defense of others and mitigating circumstances due to prolonged trauma. The jury was sympathetic to the case. I was sentenced to 3 years in a detention center for young adults with possibility of parole after 2. I behaved well, did mandatory therapy, participated in rehabilitation programs. I got out at 22, 8 months ago. Therapy in the detention center was brutal. I had to relive every moment of trauma, process the violence I suffered and the violence I committed. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD, severe depression, anxiety. They medicated me, taught me anger control techniques, made me face who I'd become. I found out that my brother Ryan was also in therapy. He carries immense guilt for the role he was forced to play. Even knowing rationally that he was a victim, emotionally he can't forgive himself. And he can't look at me without remembering. That's why he cut off contact. I get letters from him occasionally, always brief, always saying he's working on himself, that he hopes I'm well, never signed with love, just with his name. I miss my brother, the boy who protected me, who consoled me, who was my best friend. But I understand why he needs to stay away. I'm a living reminder of the worst period of his life, just as he is of mine. My life now is small and quiet. I work in a warehouse, do night shifts because I still have difficulty with crowds. I live alone in this small apartment with secondhand furniture and empty walls. I don't have close friends. I don't know how to make friends when you spent your entire life isolated. Intimacy terrifies me in ways I can barely articulate. I wake up every night with nightmares. Sometimes I dream I'm still there, trapped in that house, with her screaming orders and Ryan crying while he hurts me. Other times I dream about that night, about my hands on her face, about the blood. I wake up with my hands tingling. Sometimes I swear I still feel the blood even after washing compulsively. The question they constantly ask me, therapists, social workers, the parole officer, is if I regret it. The honest answer? I don't know. Do I regret taking her eyes, that specific form of violence? Maybe. It was brutal. It was excessive. It was permanent. But do I regret fighting back, finally saying no, stopping her from killing us? No. She was going to kill us. I'm absolutely certain of that. If I hadn't acted in that moment, Ryan would be dead. Or me. Or both of us. So ultimately, I did what I had to do to survive. So we'd both survive. But I recognized that I went beyond what was necessary, that my anger took over, that I went too far in ways I can't completely justify, and I carry that. I carry the weight of being both victim and aggressor, of having suffered unimaginable horrors and then committing a horror of my own. People who know my story divide into camps. Some see me as a hero, as someone who finally fought back against systematic abuse. Others see me as a monster, as someone who mutilated his own mother. The truth, as always, is in the middle. I'm human. I was broken in terrible ways and responded in an equally terrible way. Today I try to build something, I don't know what. A life, I suppose. An existence that isn't defined only by trauma and violence. It's hard. Some days it seems impossible. Others I can glimpse a future where I'm more than the boy who was abused and the young man who fought back. I think about Ryan constantly. I wonder if he's okay, if he's found peace, if someday we'll be able to look at each other without seeing only pain reflected. Maybe someday. But I understand if that day never comes. And my mother is serving time. I heard she still insists she was the victim, that we were the monsters, that blindness is unjust punishment for a mother who was just trying to discipline difficult children. I don't feel pity for her. I don't feel hatred either. Just emptiness. She's irrelevant now. A closed chapter of a life I'm trying to rebuild. If my story serves any purpose, let it be this. Abuse has consequences. Maybe not immediate ones, but eventually. Eventually the victim breaks. And when that happens, no one can predict the result. I broke and someone was left permanently blind. It could have been worse. It could have been fatal. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just telling my story because I need to. Because years of silence almost killed us. And maybe talking, even if to strangers on the internet, is part of the healing. I live one day at a time. I take my medication, go to therapy weekly, work, sleep when I can, and try every day to be something beyond the trauma. I don't know if I'll succeed, but at least now I have the chance to try. And that, after everything, is more than I had before. Now, if you made it this far and really understood what I went through, if you really care about my story and what I lived, I need you to do something for me. Like this video, subscribe to Traumatic Accounts, turn on notifications so you don't miss other testimonies, and tell me in the comments what time it is there right now while you're watching this. Seriously, I want to know. It helps me feel like this story reached someone, that I'm not just screaming into the void. If you stayed until the end, you've already shown more empathy than many people who should have helped me when I was a child. Thank you for listening. Thank you for not judging me before knowing the complete story, and thank you for perhaps understanding that the world isn't black and white, it's just a bunch of gray trying to make sense of chaos.